Hello again, everyone. Thanks for hanging in there with us today. So I'm going to be highlighting two different solutions in this session. The first one we're going to talk about is cash flow forecasting. And then we'll move into Rec Express for bank services, which helps to automate the reconciliation process of your bank statement to your Sage 300 entries. So with cash flow forecasting, it is a module that's going to install inside your Sage 300 environment. So it gives you the ability to use the information in Sage 300 to build out your cash flow forecast. So we're going to look at the main screen today, which is the management console. Now, cash flow forecasting works on the concept of what we call provisional transactions. Provisional transactions could be existing entries in Sage 300, or as I'm going to show you, you can also take into account new business that may not yet be booked in Sage 300, but that you want to take into account in your cash flow. So you're going to be linking to an existing bank in Sage 300, and you can select the dates that you want to build your forecast around. So you'll notice mine's 2010. I'm using some sample data. But essentially, I want to build my forecast or view where I'm going to sit from a cash flow perspective in the month of July. So when I fetch the information, you can specify an overdraft limit by bank account. So I don't have one here, but you can specify any overdraft limit that may apply to that particular bank account. So I can see what my current balance is and start to build my forecast from here. So as I mentioned, you can utilize the information you already have in Sage 300. So you can auto-generate these provisional transactions to take into account in your forecast. So you can pull in entries from accounts receivable, accounts payable, order entry, purchase orders, or your GL. And you can select entries based on whatever criteria is important to you. So we're just going to use invoice due date today, but you could also use average days to pay or a posting date or enter any specific date. We'll go with due dates within my forecast period of July 1 to July 31. Now, when I fetch that, it's going to search my Sage 300 database for all the entries that meet that criteria. And then the select column in this grid determines what you actually want to take into account on your forecast. So although something falls within the range, you could exclude entries from taking them into account on your forecast. I'm going to go ahead and leave that on and say, go ahead and generate the provisional transactions for me. And what it's going to do is create those entries in that management console. So if we close this screen, I can now see those entries. And it shows me the running balance of where I'm going to sit from a cash flow perspective. So let's also take into account our AP entries. We want, a more balanced view. So let's take into account the AP entries. And we'll go ahead and generate those as well. And then we can see those entries in our cash flow forecast. Now you notice that my running balance has now turned pink. There is a stoplight system built into the software so that we can highlight where there may be potential issues with your cash flow. So the fact that the column has turned pink or any one of those lines has turned pink, it's telling me that I'm going to be in a bit of trouble here because I'm exceeding my overdraft limit. You can also see due and overdue will turn orange, and anything with green writing tells you that's a new business entry that has not yet been entered in Sage 300. Now, throughout this management console, you can manipulate this information as you need. So you could delete any one entry from this console, and it's not affecting your underlying data in Sage 300. It's just a way for you to view where you sit from a cash flow perspective. So it looks like right out of the gate on July 1, I'm going to be into some trouble here. The entire thing is exceeding my overdraft limit. But let's just say I know that there's some new business that's going to be coming in that's going to solve that. I've got a very large contract that's $7 million, so that I want to take that into account. So the green button down here is a way for me to create a new business entry, and I can just say, you know, whatever that relates to. I'm just going to say large contract for today's purposes, but I know I'm going to be receiving that $7 million. And let's say I'm going to receive that, on July 4th, let's just say. And I know that it's a very large contract for $7 million, and I can add that. So I've added a receipt entry. You could also add a payment entry if you knew that you had some payment coming up that hasn't yet been booked in Sage 300, but you want to take that into account in your forecast. You could do that. So let's go ahead and we'll generate the provisional transaction for that $7 million. And when I refresh the screen, suddenly I'm no longer in a deficit. So you can see how you can easily manipulate the information within this screen in order to build that forecast and see where you sit. I could also generate those entries from order entry, for example, or purchase orders. So you can see document management link popping up there actually. You can pull in any types of entries within this forecast as you need to. Now, in the case of this new entry, you know, if I've entered information in this console, I may not want to have to re-enter that in Sage 300. So with this click of a button, I can generate an actual transaction in Sage 300. So whether that's a receipt that I want to generate, or a prepayment or unapplied cash, with just a click of a button, I can generate that entry in Sage 300 so I don't have to redo that. So a very quick and easy tool that gives you the ability to use the information that you already have at your disposal in Sage 300 to build out your forecast. So that's the first tool that I wanted to show you today. Now we'll have a look at the Rec Express for bank services. So I know a lot of you are probably wondering why we would be showing you a reconciliation tool when you already have a reconciliation tool in Sage 300. So I will highlight the key differences or what this product adds in terms of being able to do your reconciliations. So it will install under the bank services module. And so we're tightly integrated with bank services, which means we can also read the entries in Sage 300. So again, giving you the ability to utilize the information that you already have in Sage 300 and not duplicating your efforts. So the first key difference with Rec Express for bank services is the file type. So you do not require an OFX file. This software has about 180 or 190 bank formats that are already pre-configured in the software, so our ability to read those file formats. Now, if by chance your file format were not in the software, then the developer will add new bank formats free of charge when you purchase the product. So you'll be linking with an existing bank code in Sage 300. And the other key difference with this product is this rules template. So with Rec Express for bank services, we're giving you the ability to create rules around your reconciliation. So the idea here is when you do your reconciliation, You would do your matching of entries, but then you can create a rule. So the next time that type of entry comes through your bank statement, the software knows how to handle that entry automatically. So you don't have to intervene there. So the idea is that, when you first set up the product, you'll have certain entries off the top of your head that you'll set up in the initial implementation. But then moving forward, you would do your reconciliation and add rules. So it's going to build over time. So more and more of your entries will automatically match for you over time. And, we think that you could get into the 80 or 90 percentile in terms of entries that will match for you automatically. You could potentially take a reconciliation process that takes a day or two down to perhaps hours. So on the front screen here, we're seeing some information from Sage 300. So you can see your deposits and withdrawals outstanding, what the book balance is. Not doing great in this company. And you can also see any unposted entries in Sage 300 in case you need to take those into account. But you'll go ahead and import the file. So this is importing the file that you've downloaded from your bank. So you would just browse and pick up the file that you've downloaded from the bank and import that into RecExpress for Bank Services. And in my case, it's telling me there's 50 lines of detail that are about to be imported. Now, as soon as I hit this close button, it's going to start into the matching process. And okay, here we go. Sorry, it's just a bit delayed. Sometimes GoToMeeting causes a delay. So it's going to go through this matching process, and it actually passes through the information twice. So it'll pass through the first time, and it will do a match by reference. And then it's going to pass through the information a second time, and it's going to do a match based on the amount. So first pass through based on reference, the second pass through, it will look at amounts to try and match those entries that are still outstanding. And if it finds more than one amount that's the same, then it will look to the date to do that match. So then once the import takes place, then you'll get some information related to that import. So I can see the total value that was imported, the value that was matched, anything that was left is unmatched. And then we do have a special category of matched with error. And what tends to go into this would be it has found a matching reference, so it deems it as a match, but there's a variance in the amount, in my case 10 cents. Could be a rounding variance, but we're putting it into a special category so that you can go and have a look and determine why there was a variance within that amount. So when we come to our main RecExpress screen, these are all of the entries on my bank statement that were just imported. I can, with the click of a button, I can split my screen. And at the top, I'm still seeing those entries that were just imported on my bank statement. But at the bottom, I'm seeing entries in the bank services module. Now, there's a number of statuses. So you can filter by those that it deemed as a correct match. And so these are the line items on the statement that it deemed as a match. And at the bottom, I'm seeing the entry in bank services that it matched it against. And you'll see that the reference matches. As I click on each line of detail, I'll see the corresponding entry in the Sage 300 Bank Services module that it has matched it against. Now, although the software has matched this, nothing here is cast in stone. This used column determines whether or not you're doing the match. So if I wanted to override what the software has matched, I can just double click in that column and say I actually do not want to match that. And you'll see that the status will go back to a no match. So no concern of it matching something that you don't want to match against. You can easily override what it's done. So you can filter by those that were a correct match. In the case where it was matched with error, I can see down here 172092 is what is sitting in bank services. whereas the statement entry is 1720.82. So there's my 10-cent variance. So I can go and determine how that variance happened and how I want to handle that variance. I can view those that it matched by amount. So I'm seeing the corresponding entry, and just gives me the ability to ensure that it has matched it correctly for me. The no match is what we're going to come back and have a look at. That's where you're going to do your reconciliation with these no match entries. But before I go there, I just want to highlight another feature that is available in Rec Express for Bank Services that is not available in Sage 300. And that's the ability for you to match multiple bank entries in bank services against one line item on your bank statement, or multiple entries on your bank statement that relate to one entry in bank services. You do not have that capability with the standard reconciliation tool in Sage 300. So when we're left with our no match, so these are the entries on my bank statement that I now want to deal with. I can sort these entries by reference, by date, by amount, in ascending or descending order. I can also filter by category. So these are the different categories for entries on your bank statement. So for example, I could say I'm only interested in dealing with deposits right now, and it's going to filter what I'm seeing on the screen. So you have a lot of ways to filter the information to make it easier for users when they're doing the reconciliation. So when we talk about the one-to-many and many-to-one, if we look at this entry on my bank statement, I can actually see by the comments it relates to 3 different entries in Sage 300. So I can sort my bank services entries, again, by reference, by date, by amount, in ascending or descending order, and I can refetch that information so I can easily find information here. So how do you go about doing a reconciliation? You would highlight the line item on your bank statement. So that's signifying the entry that I want to match against bank services entries. And down here, I can find, so we've got 4567, 5896, and 5789. So there's 5789. So I've highlighted the statement entry, and now I'm going to highlight the entry in bank services. And under this use column, I'm going to double click to say I want to do a match there. Now it's saying match with error because there's a variance in the amount, but I know that this 4567 also relates to this entry, so I'll apply that. And then the 5896 and apply that, and you'll see that it changes the status from many bank entries to one statement entry. So I can do one line item on the statement against multiple bank services entries, or one bank service entry relates to multiple lines on my bank statement. Now, that type of thing is always going to be a manual. The users are going to have to do that. But when we start to talk about, one line relates to one entry in bank services, then when we scroll to the other half of the screen, you'll see where the rules reside. You can also drill into the rules template, which I think is an easier screen to view. But you can, so this is my rules template, it's just called sample. And I'm just looking at deposit entry. So again, you can filter to make it easier and limit the information you have to look at it at any given moment. So this is where you will come to add your entries to automatically do matching for you in the future. Now you can apply the transaction codes. So these are the transaction codes supplied by the bank. And so you can identify an entry using the transaction code. But what I find most important here is this compare description and compare method. This is an open field that you can enter any information that will help to identify that entry on the bank statement. And so any information you can put into this compare description. So in this case, it'll look for the word courtyard. on the statement entry to identify the transaction. Now, the compare method, you can do an equal to statement. If you know for sure that every time the word courtyard is going to be at the beginning of the description string on your bank statement, you can use that equal to statement. So that's saying, look at the beginning of the description on the bank statement. I would venture to say that in most cases, you'll use the like statement. Because that then will look through the entire description on that bank statement to find the word courtyard. So it's going to look through the entire description, find the word courtyard, and that will identify the entry on the bank statement. But in some cases, we've had clients say that they need to use more than one piece of information to identify that entry on the bank statement. So we've added in wildcards, whether they're equal to wildcards or a like statement wildcard, where you can specify, look for these characters, then I'm going to put some wildcard placeholders in, and then look for these additional characters. So it really is limitless in terms of the amount of information you can use on that bank statement to identify the entry. Once you've identified the entry, you can then specify how you want to handle that entry in Sage 300. If you're using a distribution code or distribution set, so you want to distribute that entry across multiple GL accounts, you can specify, use this distribution set to distribute it appropriately. Or if you want to post straight through to the GL, something like fees on your bank statement, I want to send those fees directly to this GL account. But you can also generate entries in Sage 300, and you can generate those entries in bank services. So maybe that 10-cent variance, I want to create a write-off in bank services for that. Or I can generate an entry in accounts payable or an entry in accounts receivable. So in the case of AR or AP, then you can specify the vendor or customer that you want that entry to go against. And then for each of those, so I can say for vendor 1240, I want to set up a prepayment. I'd rather that the user review it and apply those funds as necessary. Or you can say, I'd like to auto allocate those funds. So I want you to look at the oldest invoice and apply the funds until they've been consumed. Or I'd like to look for the amount of this entry, or I'd like to look for the document number associated with this entry and apply those funds to that amount or that document number. Now, if you set up the rule to look at the amount or the document number, and the software can't find that amount or document number, it's not going to skip the entry. It will revert up and set it up as a prepayment. So you can set these rules. So maybe I have a different rule for vendor 1210. So for each of your customers and vendors, you can specify against that customer or vendor record how you want to handle the entry in those modules. So again, the idea is you add more and more of these rules each time you do a reconciliation. So in this case, sorry, accounts receivable. So my customer 1240, I want you to set up a prepayment when anything comes in from that customer. The other thing that we add that you don't have in bank services is optional fields. So if you need to populate optional fields, and let me be clear, we're not adding optional fields to bank services, but we're allowing you to populate the optional fields that relate to AR or AP and pass that information over to accounts receivable or accounts payable. So you would build out these rules as you're doing your reconciliation so that more and more entries will match for you automatically. You have a view into your AR and AP batches. You can batch the entries from this statement. You can choose to automatically post entries. Now, in terms of automatically posting, under the setup, you can specify, I want to post bank services and AP, but I'd rather review accounts receivable, just as an example. But you can specify which ones you want to post automatically. and which ones you would rather review before they get posted. Now, we do respect the security of Sage 300, so you can set security as to who has access to this module. But if you have more than one bank account, then you can specify by bank code which user would be allowed to do the reconciliation on behalf of that particular bank. So with that, I will conclude the presentation and I will take any questions if there are any, either against cash flow forecasting or Rec Express for bank services.
I do have a few questions here. Can I take reoccurring entries into account with cash flow forecasting?
Oh, yes, I did not cover that. So if we just pop back over to the cash flow forecasting, you can set up recurring entries. So you can set those up. You can import those. So if you already have them set up in your subledger modules, you could import them here into cash flow forecasting. And then you would just hit create provisional transaction and that will land it into the management console for you. So yes, you can absolutely take into account recurring entries.
Can I reconcile credit card statements?
With Rec Express for bank services, yes, you can. So because it's not an OFX file type, I'm just going to open up this import screen again. Because it's not an OFX file type, you can import any file type here. Now you notice mine's actually just an Excel spreadsheet. So what this means is if you can get your credit card statement in an electronic format, then yes, you certainly can reconcile credit card statements using Rec Express for bank services.
The last question I have here is, can I have more than one set of rules?
Yes, you absolutely can. So this rules template, I just have one called sample, but you notice there's a finder here. So you could have multiple rules templates. So dependent on the bank, perhaps you want to have different rules set up for different bank accounts, then you could have more than one rules template. So yes, absolutely, you can have more than one.
With that being all the questions for this session, I would just like to thank you again, Nancy, for presenting.
Thank you for having us.